Hey everyone, welcome to episode 17 of Open Books with Alana and Erin, two female leaders modernizing the leadership space. Today, in my opinion, is a pretty interesting one in the sense that we talk about servant leadership and how we can pour into our teams and really support that team element of servant leadership, right? But today we're going to talk about how do you provide that inspiration and that support to other people while still maintaining your authentic voice with others and being authentic to yourself. So I just find this to be just an interesting topic to kind of talk about and dive into. So with that, let's just dive in. What does it mean to you to stay true to yourself?
So for me, it's really about sticking to your core values. Sure. We all have values that may change throughout the years, but staying true to those will keep you true to yourself.
Yeah.
As you grow and change. I do think this podcast is an example of a way that's made me think about how I'm being true to myself in less esoteric terms. Yeah. Like it's actually like writing down, typing out what my values are. And as we go through each episode, I feel like I'm discovering even more about facets of those values.
Yeah.
And so this whole podcast has been like this is who I am. I'm realizing more about myself. And in turn, by verbalizing it and actually putting it out into the world, I'm becoming more true to myself because I'm following right along with those core values.
Yeah.
So this whole thing has been very fascinating from just an internal perspective. But what do you consider staying true to yourself?
So I consider finding your own voice to be true to yourself. I think it can be easy or more easy, right? To kind of parrot things that you might hear and like I said, just parrot that back out. But I think really finding and understanding your voice connects directly to who you are.
Yeah.
I will say finding your voice comes with all the good and the bad. So it's not finding your voice and then just sugarcoating everything.
Yeah.
There's good and bad that comes with that. And it's interesting that you brought up the podcast because I would say for me, it's very much helped me more so nail and define down my voice as well. Because then like when we're preparing for an episode or something, it's like, there was a time in the beginning I would write something and it's like, no, that's not really what I would do. Like, and like erase it and be like, this is really what I think.
Yeah.
So I think just keeping that in check. Yeah, I agree with you in that sense that the podcast has really, I think, helped solidify how we authentically show up, I would say.
Yeah. I totally agree. And for anyone out there who's thought about doing a podcast or even just something where you're recording or talking about stuff with people, the whole coming up with topics and then the related questions and how we would answer them has been so eye-opening.
Yeah.
And for sure, like when you first start your leadership journey, I mean, even now I find myself parroting or using, leadership terminology, kind of like that corporate speak. Like I find myself doing that, but I'm starting to recognize it more when I am just leaning back on something that I've heard or it's not necessarily my true voice. And not that I think that parroting is necessarily bad.
Right.
I think at the beginning it's how you learn, and you haven't really figured out your true voice yet. But anyone who's thought about doing some kind of social media or anything like that, like go for it.
Well, and I think also to add to that, what's interesting is, so you and I bounce off of each other for ideas for the episode and stuff. And so you might have a topic or something that I've not really put a lot of thought into before. And so what's interesting is kind of learning where your voice stands when it's not something you might think about that's not top of mind for you, but just learning like how you fall on those new topics that pop up and like trusting that voice that you have has been really interesting.
Very much so.
Yep.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
There have been a couple episodes where I'm like, I've never thought of this before. Alana, what are you doing to my brain?
That's never come up for me. Yep.
So definitely, if you've thought about doing it, do it. It'll make you learn a lot about yourself.
Yeah.
And would also say, similar to you, like throughout this whole thing, my voice, I think, and yours, and has become much more solidified.
Yep.
In what it is.
Yeah. And then, I mean, just to add on, I think then outside of the podcast, like, because this is public, right? And even just like in my personal life, then it's like, well, that is public, what I said, right? And I do believe that. And it can be brought up, or, you know, that, I mean, it's just out there.
Yep.
And so you can't really hide from that either.
Yes.
So
it's been, I've had a couple coworkers or team members who've been like, hey, I found your podcast.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay.
Thumbs up.
Please give me a thumbs up. I need to be told that I'm okay.
Yeah.
So speaking of our teams, how do you stay true to yourself as you're inspiring your team members or other colleagues, maybe at the same level, or your team below you?
Yeah. How do I stay connected to the leadership, or to the authentic voice of who I am, right?
Yep.
I think for me, it's a lot of like checking in with myself and really making sure like my actions and what I'm saying align. Because I think it's easy to say something, like I said earlier, you're not fully connected to it, or even through your actions, you're still communicating some sort of message. You're still communicating some sort of authentic version of yourself. And so I think for me, it's really making sure that those are in check and giving myself a chance to like, is this true to me? Like, I think sometimes we move so fast that there can be a tendency to say the easy thing in the moment because you just got to keep moving on. And we've talked about that in other episodes of, you know, slowing down and saying what you really need to say. But I think that just speaks to your authentic voice of really making sure it is how you feel and that you're saying something true to yourself in the moment. What about you?
Very similar. Because we do move so fast, it can be very easy to go with that first instinct, kind of that gut check, and lead from that perspective. But I think we oftentimes have bad habits that we're trying to break that are from previous managers or something like that. And so we're trying to break free from that and recognize our own voice over what maybe we have experienced in the past. So taking that moment to think like, okay, is this aligning with my values? Because that's what's driving my ability to be authentic. Does it align with those values? Is it how I would handle any other team member that was in a similar situation? Am I being fair to everyone involved? Because that's what I really want, is to, you know, be fair and have trust with the team. And I think handling things similarly is needed sometimes. So it definitely is kind of just aligning with those values. And to kind of reference before that kind of fake it till you make it, even if you are parroting or anything, like to get over the imposter syndrome of being a leader, if you always bring it back to those core values, you can be assured that at least at some point you are staying true to yourself and what your goals are in leadership in general.
And I think that's a really good point, that like in the beginning, you definitely do fake it till you make it, right, in some manner. And I think you have to in some cases, but I think it's important to always keep that in check so that you shouldn't fake your voice, like your values and your authentic self. And so there might be some level of the faking it till you make it, but you're still driving on your authentic self, and the foundation is still your values, with that kind of layered on top of just like going through the motions until you understand like the why and the what behind it. So just not getting those two confused, because I think you can get hung up in that. And then, you're years down the road, and it's like, what I'll say is, it's interesting when somebody asks you, like, what is your leadership style? And if you can't, like, just have an answer to that, it's like, maybe you just need to take a step back and think about that a little bit more. So that you have that authentic answer to those type of questions.
And using that fake it till you make it is a great way to learn what kind of leadership style you have. As if you do something and it doesn't ring true through the end result, then okay, I've learned from this. That's not how I want to handle this in the future. Or maybe it is. But you wouldn't have known that if you didn't give it a try.
How do you know, like, how does it feel for you when you try something that doesn't ring true to yourself? What are some things that you feel afterwards, knowing it's not?
Huge amounts of anxiety. And also, like, whenever there's a big issue at work, or maybe something celebratory, it could be anything larger, good or bad, I always try to step back and think about the whole situation and what my actions were, what I could have done differently, and how that would have affected the outcome. But definitely taking that step back and just looking at it not totally objectively, but more specific on my actions and what entailed there. So that's normally how I do it. I know things have gone bad and not how I want when that like stomach full of ice feeling happens. I know I've done something, like I haven't spoken with my values in mind, or I've done that knee-jerk reaction, and it wasn't the right move. I usually know pretty quickly when I've done the wrong thing. But I do try to take that step back. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar. I like immediately feel disappointment with myself of like, that's not what you wanted to say there. And it's a lot of, usually I'm asking myself like, why didn't you just say, what was true to you? And so I think it's just working through like, okay, this is, in my head, like, this is why I didn't say it. Here's what I would like to do differently, type of thing. Do I need to fix it now? Or is it, I can just, address it in the next similar situation. But it's that immediate like disappointment of like, what are you doing? Type of thing.
How do you support your team to provide authentic leadership?
I think for me, this is just modeling that behavior of like, I'm coming from my true self. I want to hear from you, and like taking the time to listen, and understand what they're saying, but give them that time, to speak about their true self, and just acknowledge, even if it's in a moment where a different decision has to be made or something based on the situation, just explaining like, I understand what you're saying. This is what we have to do. But just acknowledging what they're saying and giving that space, I think, is one of the most important things that you can do. What about you?
So I have a bad habit of when a situation arises, of telling the team how I would do it, and then letting them do something. And then when they aren't doing it the exact way I told them that I would handle it, I'll go in and like edit the email or like, oh, this is what I would have said, blah, blah, blah. So I've been consciously trying not to do that, to be okay. Like I'll share my experience and then let them run with it, let them see it play out. Cause I want them to be able to have the same experience that I did and helping them find their own voice. But it's very hard to not want them to respond to everything the same way I want
You
them
would.
to.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I think giving them that space, listening to them, like you mentioned, and letting them see the results.
Yes.
You know, whether it ends up good or bad or, you know, neutral. But letting them see that through and then doing like an after action review of like, okay, this is what we did. This is what happened. What do you think about that? Did you like how it was resolved? Kind of questioning them so that they're self-identifying things that they liked about it, things that they didn't like, to hopefully solidify their voice a little bit more.
Yeah. And then they get that learning experience, you know, just like we had, you know, in the beginning. Like all leaders have to have that learning experience, whether, like you said, whether it goes well or unfortunately, sometimes we all, you know, fall down sometimes. And that's all just part of the learning experience, I think, which can be very tough.
It definitely can.
Not always a good time.
That'd be nice if it was, but we wouldn't learn anything.
We wouldn't learn anything. Exactly. Yeah. And to be fair, I think, you know, as a servant leader, when you allow your team to be authentic, I've learned stuff from my team where I'm like, whoa, like you're totally right. Yeah. And just allowing yourself, you know, as a servant leader to be open to that, and hearing other people, and then, being open to maybe changing your ways as well.
Yeah. Being open to changing our own ways, like not being so, steadfast isn't the right word, but rigid in our own voice and unwilling to grow and learn, I think will stunt us. Totally. Whereas if we are willing to learn from our team, our voice can shift and change and solidify the more we listen.
Totally. Yep. I agree.
So what have you learned from a team member or a mentor?
Yeah. What I've learned is coming to work not in your true self is exhausting. And because you're working so far outside of like your comfort zone and your, you know, core values that it just wipes you every day. And so it's more important to find what aligns with you while still challenging yourself for sure, but aligning with yourself and speaking from those core values and from your true voice. There's something really powerful that happens when things are in alignment for you and your why matches the firm's why, matches your team's why, and you're all speaking from your authentic selves. I think that's just a really powerful thing that can happen. Yep. What's something that you've learned?
Is that it's okay to be your authentic self. For so many years through my whole like working career, from when I was 16, 15, whenever I started. In Idaho, you can start work early. Yes. It was always like molding myself into what was the employer's version of success and what kind of voice the employer wanted me to have, if that makes sense.
Totally. Yep.
And so that was from when I started working to probably when I really started working closer with Tony. Yeah. And then it became apparent through his mentorship that it is not just okay for me to be myself, but also needed. And that is probably one of the like core tenets that I got from his mentorship is you're a weird person and that's okay. Right. Because we're all weird in our own ways. Be yourself. And once I realized that, my work fulfillment and satisfaction and social fulfillment and satisfaction just skyrocketed. Yep. Totally. and now I'm like the most happy I've ever been in my career. Love my team, love my firm. Like it's so satisfying and not exhausting because what you mentioned is so very true. And I exhausted myself for years and years trying to be something that I just wasn't. So yeah, thank you, Toni.
Well, and what I would tell myself back then kind of builds off of what you just said, actually, in showing up as your authentic self with your voice. What I would tell myself is, people want that, and like your voice is wanted at the table. Because if we all, it's very common in groups to start that group thinking, right?
Yes.
And you all just kind of repeat each other, and you can do that in meetings, and it's like, wow, we have really great ideas, you guys. Like, and you know, but having those different voices at the table, leaders want that in a professional way, right? And in the right manner and everything. But your voice is wanted at the table that you're at because it brings a different perspective. And so to not shy away from that, like you talked about.
Definitely.
Yeah. What's something that you would tell yourself back then?
Stick to your values.
Yeah.
They will possibly change or shift over time, and that's okay. Change isn't necessarily bad, as we've discussed many times. But I feel like if I had stuck to my values longer, my earlier career would have been less exhausting, less stressful. So I would have gone back and like, just be your weird self.
Totally.
It's okay.
Yeah.
Yes. So that would be but I learned a lot from it.
Totally.
Like,
yep.
You learn through strife.
Yes.
And definitely learn from it. But stick to those values. So your core values.
Yep.
Yeah.
There's a lot of power being your weird self anywhere you are.
Yep. Definitely.
Cool. Thanks, everyone, for tuning into Open Books. We aim to share insights gained from our past and future experiences to foster growth within the leadership and accounting communities. See you next time.
See ya.